Hello, and welcome to the Kreative Devices Mobile Podcast, a podcast created for all creative devices users to tell their story and to help bring even more creative awareness to the world. Today we are joined by the one and only Dan, aka TheLonely Rocker. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing well, my friend. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Thank you
And I'm
for
happy that Mhm. You
thank you
say?
for having me on here.
Oh, of course, of course. You and I have been planning another sit down face to face for a while, but our schedules have just not allowed it until now. And it's cool we get to record it.
Good things are worth waiting for.
Yeah, yeah. So you and I, we've nerded out about different stuff, studio gear and computers and stuff like that. You've been dealing with computers and stuff like that for a long time, like I have, and you have a lot of cool gear in your studio. I don't have a studio anymore, unfortunately, but I can live vicariously through you and other people that have all this amazing gear.
hmm
And you are, I gotta say, man, I've been watching you for a long time, and I really like your channel. I really like what you've been doing.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. Coming from someone like yourself who knows what he's talking about, that means a lot.
Thank you, thank you. So obviously, I know who you are, and lots of people know who you are. But for anyone who may not be on YouTube that much and don't know who you are, please let us know who you are, what you do, etc.
Well, I call myself Dan, the self-proclaimed Lonely Rocker. Lonely Rocker is the name of my channel, and it's sort of autobiographical because I've when I started my channel, I was already an independent video production producer kind of guy, and I sort of made a name for myself in the television industry in Canada because I'm sort of multidisciplined, where they would hire me to do like write the script, direct, shoot, edit, just do the whole thing, and it just became. And I found myself working alone a lot. And musically, I hadn't played in bands for a long time. Actually, funny side note: my YouTube channel used to be called "I Don't Have a Band." Tools for the Lonely Rocker, and then one day I'm looking at Lonely Rocker going, hey, that's a lot cooler, I think. And plus I was able to get the .com. But it's, as I said, it's autobiographical. I've been in music many years, though professionally I've been on the video production side, and that's sort of where the polish comes from in terms of my channel. Is just I've been producing music videos, TV commercials, done series of corporates, done long form. So I brought that sort of production sensibility to YouTube, but I didn't want to do a channel about my job. I wanted to do a channel about my passion, and I've been playing guitar as long as I can remember. And this pursuit of creating things and making things better, it is a journey, and I've been learning through this whole process. So who I am, I'm a veteran producer in the media game, and decided to take my skills and apply it to my passion, and then present this little experience that I call Lonely Rocker, where I try to appeal to guys who just love guitars and gear, and don't rely on other people to make the sounds and to pursue the tones that they hear in their head.
Nice, nice. And how long have you been doing this YouTube channel exactly?
Well, that's interesting because I turned it on, I think 2018. I got a notification just this morning congratulating me on my 9th year, but I haven't been doing it for 9 years. I mean, I've been on YouTube like everyone has been for many years, but in 2018, I turned on the channel where I started
Mm.
making a few videos, but it was very much in the background. Though, funny enough, the first video that what I call the first official episode on my channel was a video I did about acoustic panels. I think you can see some of them, well, maybe a little off camera here. That video is still to date my most successful video, over 700,000 views, almost 800,000 views now. But the pandemic was when I started to do this regularly because I had no choice. Everything shut down, but I had set up a home studio and I had just started doing YouTube. So suddenly I had this vehicle. So my wife had a good government and still has a good government job. So she was working full time through the pandemic, but being in production in rooms with 40 people just didn't happen. So I said, look, I'll do my best to watch the kids. If I can start doing this once a week, I'll feel like I'm contributing something to my life and whatever. So around 2020, I started doing it on a more full-time basis. And coming out of that, I thought, okay, maybe I'll get back into what I was doing before, but I was having too much fun. And just sort of kept doing it and started turning away television work that was starting to come back. And I don't know if it was a smart decision at my age to do this full-time, but yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
Well, you seem like you're pretty successful to me.
Well, what's the definition of success? We can have a whole podcast on that, I guess. But, if I was 25 and, I'd have all the time in the world, but I wouldn't have the experience that I have now. This is
That
sort
is
of, I think
true.
about it, oh man, I wish I did this when I was 25. And I think about what I was doing when I was 25. I was like, I didn't know anything when I was 25. I've
Yeah.
learned a lot of what I know, and specifically in tone. Like, because I started more as a home studio channel, actually, I should say. I've only been doing the guitar thing full time on the channel for about 2.5 years. So it's still pretty young,
Mhm.
even though the channel's been around. But I used to cover DAW controllers and plugins and acoustic panels and all that stuff. And then a couple of years ago, I decided, hey, I'm not playing enough guitar. And I want to play more guitar, and maybe if I niche down a little bit and I identify with a specific community. And I walked away from some pretty big videos. I'm talking about videos that got hundreds of thousands of views. I just blocked them, because how many times can I talk about acoustic panels, right? So, but
Yeah.
that definition of success is like, now I feel like I'm in a community that I belong to. I've never had such a large community of people I call friends, like all around the world, and the support network. And I took the channel on the road this summer for the first time, went to Germany and met some brands and other channels. And in that sense, I feel a sense of arrival. Like, success is relative, I guess. There's a lot of risks that come with doing this because it's a very fickle industry,
Mhm.
right? And being this term YouTuber, I mean, they call us content creators, right? I mean, I've been a television producer, I've been a video editor for many, many years. I didn't call myself a content creator, right? But now everything's sort of become the one thing. So, financially, it's not easy. I find I have to work 5 times as hard to make a semblance of what I was making before. But I feel that the ceiling is a lot higher. The potential to grow and meet people around the world and experience things I never would have just making,
Mhm.
cereal commercials. You know what I mean? So in
Mhm.
that sense, I feel successful. But on the other hand, I feel like I still have a ways to go. But that's what drives you to keep moving, right? If you've arrived,
Yeah.
you got nowhere to go, I guess, right? So I still got lots to do and say.
The only way to go is forward.
That's it.
That's it. There's no going back from here.
Oh, that's for sure.
So, you do play guitar. I've noticed you ripping it up in some of your videos. How did your guitar journey begin?
It's funny because as a kid, your parents want to put you in something cultural, and my father had this classical guitar lying around the house. Something, he was never a guitar player. My dad always loved music, so this guitar was in the house. And I guess some kids get piano lessons, see if it sticks. My parents put me in classical guitar lessons, and I hated it because it was boring. I can still remember the first dun, 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 dun,
Mhm.
dun. This is red book that everyone starts with. And my teacher, I would sit in his room and he would drink coffee and spit in a cup while I was sitting there trying to learn. The early memories of playing. And they had to force me to practice 15 minutes a day, and I wasn't doing it. So eventually they just said, but then the rock and roll bug bit me, and specifically, I discovered Rush. And I remember that was the year Moving Pictures had come out. It was on the radio all the time, and I just had to have that record. I heard it in school my last day of grade 5, and I worked for my father that summer, a little part-time job, making a nickel per box,
Mhm.
putting product in a box. Anyway, so I made $10, $20, and I went to the store and I bought Moving Pictures. And I remember sitting in my room with a tennis racket, just emulating those riffs. It got to me. I mean, I imagine as a kid that young, I was, what was I? Yeah, wow. I was 11 years old, 10 years old, listening to this progressive rock band. I think about short attention span. We talk about that a lot, but those riffs just got to me, and I didn't know what I was necessarily listening to, but I knew that I liked it. And playing that tennis racket. So then I was like, I gotta play this. I want to play. And my parents were a little sort of, you gave up on this already. So I borrowed an electric guitar from a friend of a friend, and that was it. I wanted to play some rock and roll, and I wanted guitar lessons again, and still had that crappy classical guitar I took to my first, blues rock lessons. He said, well, if you want to do this, you need an electric guitar. So again, that summer I had worked. I must have been maybe 12 years old. I'm a little bit foggy on the exact age, but give or take. And spent a little bit of time in the summer in my dad's office in the warehouse, packing some boxes and stuff, and saved up some shekels. And I walked into a music store that was pretty famous at the time. It was called the Music Shop. A lot of local Toronto bands would get their gear from there. And there was this Gibson guitar, hanging on the rack, and it was a Gibson Challenger, but it was about $200. It was an American-made Norland era single cut thing, and it was $200. Seemed, oh, it's a Gibson and it's only $200, and I please, 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 and my parents finally gave in and bought that guitar. Didn't even have an amp, but that's sort of when the journey started. And there's a lot of chapters since then, but that's sort of how the ball got rolling in the guitar.
Okay. Listen, everyone has their story, man. It's always interesting to find out how each person started, and you realize everyone's story is just so different from your own. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Some of them even similar.
I'll say back in the day, like when you're talking about the 80s, when, like all the hair metal bands, like guitar rock was one of the more dominant genres at the time. So the thing was, guys would learn how to play guitar to get girls, right? I said, but somehow I got into progressive rock, and you learn the very hard way that the guys who into progressive rock don't get girls. Because they're spending too much time practicing their guitar, right?
Yeah. You end up practicing to play for other musicians instead of for, other people.
Yeah. You know what? It paid off for a lot of those guys who had patience, and I admire those guys.
Yeah.
To this day, I admire those guys a lot who stuck with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I need to, I've been picking the guitar back up myself.
Good.
Every now and then I pick it up and play around unplugged. One day I'm going to make some time to plug it in, but for right now, I'm just trying to, get my hands synced back to it. I miss it. I've been noticing for a while something has been missing, and it's definitely been guitar. And it was a struggle in the beginning, and it's a little easier now, even though I'm just playing it unplugged. I'll see what happens once I plug it in. But
I know you're interviewing me, but why did you stop?
A lot of things happened. Kreative Devices was one of them.
Sure.
It took up so much of my time, and every chance I had, I had to dedicate it towards this. So for about 2 years, I couldn't really play guitar. There was times where I picked up a guitar and I messed around. I think a couple years ago, some friends of mine bugged me to play because I hadn't been playing. And there was a guitar competition. I don't do guitar competitions. I've never done them. I was never I didn't really care about competing. That was just never my thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were shred competitions. And I'm not in my 20s anymore, so I don't really care about shred stuff, But when I listened to that backing track, it sounded musical to me. And everything else that I heard other people doing over it was just shreddy, it sounded like they were playing exercises over it. No one was actually playing anything musical that had any sort of feel to it. Not that they couldn't, they just weren't doing it, because it's a competition. You're trying to show your skills. So I thought, I actually like it. I hear something musical over it. So I started humming stuff, and then eventually what I was humming in my head just wouldn't leave me alone. So I picked up the guitar on a Friday night before I went to bed, started playing around with the idea I had. Then Saturday, sometime once I was free, I played around with it some more. And then Sunday, when I was free, I played around with it some more. And then I said, you know what? Let me just record what I have. It wasn't perfect because I hadn't been doing it that long, but I set up my phone on a tripod and I set my computer up to record. I did 3 takes straight through, and I ended up uploading the third one. However it came out, that was it. I just put it up. And it was just for fun. I wasn't trying to win the competition. Could I have played it better? Yes. But I hadn't been playing guitar for a while, so it was what it was. But it still got pretty decent comments on it. It made me feel like, wow, for a guy who doesn't play guitar right now, people are loving this stuff. I got to start playing guitar again. But then everything was just, Creative Devices started taking off, and I had to put all my time into it. And here we are today. So this year, my goal is to play more guitar.
Well,
and get back
it's
to
kind of like me. My channel
Yeah.
took me away from playing guitar because my channel wasn't about guitar. And
Yeah.
I decided to niche down. I mean, obviously different with running a computer company, but it forced me to play more guitar, and we'll keep it up. We need more guitar players keeping active in this world of ours.
Yes. So I definitely plan to, because I actually wrote a solo album. and I recorded most of it. I just didn't finish it. So what I want to do is I want to go over the stuff that I have. I think I need to record vocals for the songs that have vocals, and relearn what I did, years ago.
Isn't that
That's it.
tough? If you don't like
Yeah.
videotape yourself or record yourself playing it, sometimes I'll like, especially, and I've heard other YouTubers talk about this. Guitar
Mhm.
players. Rabea Masad is a good example. I mean, he's one of the leaders in our little niche, killer player. And I saw in a video where he's like, sometimes he's just blasting through solos and stuff for a demo, and then he doesn't remember what he played. And
Mhm.
you have your what I call your isms, right? So you can kind of figure out
Mhm.
your isms that you kind of do all the time. But you stumble on something cool and you don't sort of save it or take a shot of yourself playing it. I mean, if you got perfect ears, my ears are okay. They're not perfect. So lifting your own stuff is the most frustrating thing when you can't figure it out because it's like that's me playing it, but I can't figure that out. It happens sometimes. So the beauty of being on YouTube and making videos for the visual medium is that I shoot myself playing my own songs, and I make sure that I get good shots of me playing them. And I do actually work it because there's multiple things going on at the same time, like all the chords and stuff. I can't possibly like record perfectly and light it and everything, so I'll record it and then I'll sort of music video it when I'm doing the video. But the guitar solos, if there's a guitar solo in the video, sometimes I'll write a set solo, but often I don't have time to do that, so I'll turn on the camera and I'll record live with the camera going on, and I might do few takes till I get it right. Sometimes if I have to comp it, whatever, but I have all the takes live, like shot live as I was playing them. So that's how I get around that. But yeah, you said learning your own stuff sometimes it can be frustrating.
Yeah. Especially if you do a lot of improvisation
Yeah,
and you sometimes don't know what you're doing. You just get caught up in the moment and you do something that you might not have normally done, like the isms that you call it,
yeah,
right? Sometimes I'll try to relearn something that I played and it's just like, I played that? Like, what is that? It's not what I normally
yeah,
do. And then I'm
yeah.
sitting there figuring it out and I'm just like, I wonder where that came from. But it's always an interesting thing. One of the things with me was when I started learning to play guitar, I didn't take lessons, so I taught myself. So I had a very uh, weird way of learning. It was basically what I call following the sounds. So I can follow sounds that I hear, depending on where I am on the guitar, or know where a note is around this area, and then from here go to the next one, and so on and so forth. When I started learning other people's songs, like the bands that I like, Guns N' Roses, Ozzy Osbourne, Black Sabbath, Hendrix, like all Megadeth, all these stuff, all the songs that I learned. When it was time for me to start learning my own songs, my stuff and everyone else's stuff, that the guys that were playing around me, all of our songs started to sound too much like our influences, and I didn't like that. So
Mhm.
I forbid myself from learning other people's music just so that I would only be able to bring out what was inside of me. But no matter what you do, whatever you listen to is your influence.
Oh,
So whether you learn it or not, somehow, some way, something that sounds like this person or something that sounds like that person is going to come out. I can play a line that isn't necessarily a slash line, but you might hear slash influence in the way I play it, or you might hear Steve Vai influence, or Marty Friedman influence in the way, or Chuck Schuldiner influence in the way I play it, whatever it might be.
mhm.
Um, Lately, I've been hearing, you know, well, not lately, but the last things I've heard was like Greg Howe, Richie Kotzen, stuff like that, which big praise because those guys are incredible. I wouldn't put myself in their category, right?
Mm.
um Funny enough, I explained this to someone else before. Greg Howe just happens to still be my favorite guitar player, and the reason I found him was a friend of mine said, I found this guitar player, he's incredible, he sounds like you. And I'm like, sounds like me?
Mm.
I was like, okay, this ought to be interesting because in my mind, I'm unique. I tried to be unique because I like unique players. I didn't want to sound like everyone else. So I'm like, someone that sounds like me, let me listen to this. And when I'm listening to this guy, I'm like, there's no way this guy sounds like me. He's
Yeah.
way too good to sound like me. You know, I'm like, I probably couldn't sound like this guy if I tried, and I wouldn't because it's just not my thing. But as I kept listening, I understood what he was talking about. There are certain similarities in the way that I phrase things
Hmm.
that he does too. It's kind of like, how do I put this? Um, it's just, it's not so, really the phrasing, and everyone knows phrasing is not so much how you say something, not what you say, but how you say it, right? It's the same
Yeah,
thing with not what you play, but how you play it. I think we put our character into what we do, and because he does it too, a lot of guys do it. Vi does it, Friedman does it. A lot of great players put themselves into their playing, and there are just certain ways that I might bend something or slide into something, and he'll do it too. And once I've heard that, I was just like, this guy is like, he's playing what I wish I was playing. So
mm,
I can understand where the similarity comes from, but he's just so much better at it than I am. And he's still my favorite player because I guess I can relate to the things that he's playing more than other players, if that makes any sense.
sure. It's interesting because I'm sure this goes without saying in every vocation and every genre and whatever, but as guitar players, we're always our own worst critic, right? Because we seem to focus on our flaws and not our strengths. And it's part about being a guitar player when, well, at least the type of guitar player that has a pursuit of a certain level of playing. If you're just a 3 chord around the campfire, you probably don't care, right? But, listening to progressive rock as I do and jazz and metal kind of stuff and with some amazing players, you always feel inferior to these players. But the funny thing is that the audience has a different type of critical ear.
Mm.
And I would never personally put myself at the level of any of my heroes. But I do emulate what some of them do. And through my own methods, I present sometimes, I'm not going to say at that level, but in the ballpark. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And I'm not saying this because I feel that way about myself as a player, because I don't. For example, I did a video where I emulated a Rush song. And I did it for, there was an Alex Lifeson pack of amps and stuff, right? A Tonex thing. And I wrote a Rush song. Now, some people regard them as like, one of the top, musicians around. I had to do everything by myself. It's not like I was just emulating Alex Lifeson. I had to emulate Geddy Lee and then digitally emulate Neil Peart. That's quite a feat. I'm not suggesting I was anywhere on that level, but the finished piece of music had an effect on some people and they liked it. And, you know, I did a whole video about this actually because I watch some guitar players on YouTube and I'm just blown away. They turn on the camera, at least the perception is they turn on the camera, they have a guitar in their hand, they're demoing a pedal or an amp or something, and they're just playing freely and it sounds so good. I can't do that. I've tried. Not that I can't play, but I can't do that. I was at Gear Street, Henning Polly's Gear Street this year, and I felt so self-conscious in front of all of these guitar players. I even worked out a little mini repertoire. So when the camera went on, let's pick number 3 and do that thing. My fingers felt swollen. Well, it was hot, but my fingers felt like sausages. My brain quit, and I was doing pentatonic scales. You know what I mean? It drives me nuts. But the thing is, some people are so improvisational, they can just pull off amazing stuff. Maybe they've just got a huge bag of tricks ready to go. I find I'm more of a compositional player where I need time to work something out. And because
Mm.
I'm sort of assume the producer role ish, I'm recording, I'm mixing, I'm putting the music together, I listen to everything as a composition and how my part fits into that. So if I got to work it out and take some time, what I'm putting into that song, I feel comfortable with, I'm sometimes proud of, but sometimes it takes me a little bit of time to work it out till it sounds satisfactory to my ear, right? And then what I present, some people may think, oh, wow, you whipped that off in one take, right? Sometimes
Mm.
I did. Sometimes I didn't, right? But it's okay because we all have different paths to get there. I really admire those guys that could just rip it up without any thought and can make a video in
Mm.
an hour and gets 100,000 views. I have to work a bit harder to make that happen. But I still set that standard for myself. And I want to
Mm.
get to that level that I feel comfortable with and I feel like this is me.
Mm.
So, but as I said, guitar players are very self-critical. but that does drive us, pushes us to, want to be better.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And don't ever feel any way about that. Being an improvisational player, most of these guys they play all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like their world is improv. So their practice isn't practice, it's just them improving.
Yeah.
And the reason I was able to be able to I'm saying the same thing again. The reason why I was able to improv was because at some point in time I stopped practicing.
Yeah.
And the only time I picked up the guitar was to play. So there wasn't any practice. It was only playing.
Yeah.
So all I did when it came to solos was improv.
Yeah.
And if I had time and I was working out something over a piece of music, it was just whatever I heard. And a lot of people that improv, they don't always get it one take. So for that solo album, all those solos were improv, but I recorded different takes of me improving. And what I did was I took, okay, I like this part here and I like that part there. And then if I messed up and I had to do it over again, then I'll say, all right, well, I remember what I did here. Let me just play this piece straight through again. That's what a lot of things happen. Even though it's improv, a lot of it, especially when it's being recorded, you'll have people punch in or just do different takes. It's
Sure.
only live when, whatever comes out comes out. And
Yeah.
it's never going to be perfect 100% of the time because we're human. No one's ever going to be
Yeah.
perfect,
Yeah.
you know?
So it's true. Like playing and practicing. Playing is like cardio. It certainly serves
Yes,
its function, gets things moving. But if you want to focus on a specific muscle and work on something, you got to spend time on it. You got to focus it. So it's true.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, uh, what did you, we know you started with the guitar and, where did you go from that Gibson?
Oh, okay. So, well, here's another quick funny story is that I was reading, the guitar magazines and stuff, and I saw an
Mm,
ad for the Ibanez Roadstar series. Is it Roadster or Roadstar? They had both, right? In the early '80s,
mm,
early to mid '80s. And it was, I remember seeing it was all different colors. It was sort of like what today we'll call sort of the early onset of the Super Strats, right? It was
okay.
when just before the Ibanez got into the RGs. It was literally
Okay.
like the last one. But at that point, I remember Ibanez was not so good. I had a friend who had an Ibanez and I didn't like it. But suddenly they released this Roadstar 2. It had a Floyd Rose style tailpiece on it. It was like an HSS configuration. Well, I had different configurations. But I saw this ad and I was like, oh man, I got to have this. But my parents were like, well, if you want to get that one, you got to sell the old one, right?
Mm,
So I was like, I wanted it so bad. So I sold it to a couple of friends of mine were working at this local pizza shop. And there was one of the chefs there said he would buy it. So I can't remember what he offered to pay me, but just before I went to deliver the guitar, one of the guys that worked there, who was sort of a quasi friend, he wasn't a close
mm,
friend and he wasn't the nicest guy in the world, but he said to me, he says, you know what? I'm not sure about this guy. Get his check. I will hold the guitar. And when the check goes through, I'll give him the guitar. Well, the check bounced. And I think back now, I could have lost that guitar and ended
yeah.
up with nothing. But this guy who wasn't always the nicest guy to me, funny enough, he was the guy that I borrowed that first electric guitar, same guy. Um,
Mm,
for someone I haven't seen in probably 30 years, he certainly had an impact on my life, right? So,
mm,
anyways, he gave me the guitar back. And I said to my parents, I don't want to let this go, and I want that next guitar. And they said, fine. And I ended up getting that Ibanez. I still have it. I have both of those guitars, by the way. I have almost all the guitars I've ever owned. So that the Ibanez was number two. And then I think from there probably would have been what I call my number one today, and that's my Gibson Howard Roberts Fusion 3. Again, being a Rush fan, Lifeson was known to use a Howard Roberts. It's sort of like a single cut hollow body, kind of like a 335, but a single cut with a Les Paul shape kind of thing. He was famous for playing that through the moving pictures era and stuff, like live. Tom Sawyer, he was always playing that Howard. And I saw it at a guitar show when I was in high school, but I couldn't afford it. But when I got my first job out of college, I was just chilling on the internet one day and I happened on the Gibson website and that was the year, this was the early 90s, early to mid 90s, and they were promoting this line of guitars at that particular time and I saw it and I was like, there's only one question that needed to be answered at this point, red or black. So I just literally hopped in my car. I was living downtown. I went to this well-known music store in downtown. I walked in and there was one hanging up on the high rack above my head. It was the only one they had in stock. It was black with gold hardware. I don't even think I played it. And if I remember, it was about, I think it was like $1,300 or something. This is in the early '90s, so not
Wow.
expensive, not cheap. But that guitar, if you can find one today, you're probably going to spend thousands more, right?
Mhm.
But so that became number one and has continues to be number one. I've added a lot of guitars just in the last few years since I've been doing this channel, actually, because which is the inventory has grown, let's say. But those are the first three. I mean, the Gibson, the Ibanez, and then I think that's when the Gibson, the real Gibson, made an appearance, and then it grew from there.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. So we know where you started with guitars. You have a technology background. Why don't we dive into your technology background? You can tell us where you started with that and how you got to where you are now.
So I was never afraid of computers. I mean, right from the time I was about 12, about 13, I got my first home computer, and that was an Atari 400. And
Mm.
so I never had a video game system as a kid, and my parents sort of resisted because around that time you had the Atari 2600, the Intellivision, ColecoVision. The gaming industry was pretty healthy at that time, but my parents sort of resisted the idea of getting a video game machine at home. They were more, maybe if we get a computer, I could learn
Mm.
some things on it. So around the time I was 13, I got an Atari 400, and it was like, and I didn't even have a real keyboard. It was like a flat touch keyboard thing, but it accepted cartridges, and of course there was games. But I remember I had a basic cartridge, and I was actually messing around in basic back in those days, and I started learning how to draw the screen with the joystick, and couldn't figure out how to set boundaries, and I keep having errors and stuff like that. Even created a little psychologist program where I created a data string of different variables, and it would ask simple questions, and it could pull from a database. I mean, that was an early database, I guess. Like, I mean, I never got that far, but understanding you can put a query in, and then it could pull from the 10 options that I entered in. Now, you think about AI today, I mean, it's just the technology just takes a lot of resources to fill that database with possibilities. It's the same concept, I assume, just far more complex, but I understand it because I remember in those days writing this little piece of software that how do you feel? And I say, oh, I feel good. And it'll say, that's good, that's great, glad to hear it. It'll pick one of the three and respond, right? So I kind of got that, but I never got deep into programming at that point. But it was always comfortable with computers. That eventually turned into the family had a PC in the house, and I I quickly figured out how to get into the root there and change the startup sounds and the little like the DOS default, alerts and stuff.
Mm.
There was the error. I don't remember what it sounded like, but when you made an error or something, it had this particular WAV file, and I found it in the directory. So I learned how to record into the computer. You have made an error, and I changed the file name and I popped it in, but I didn't tell anyone, and it scared the shit out of my sister the first time she heard it because that was such a radically new concept, right? So it just showed my willingness, my to tinker, right? I was never afraid to tinker, so that kind of continued. Eventually having my own computer, and then I got into. I guess when I went to film school, film and TV production, and then very early on there, I just learned I wanted to be alone because in college you'd have like everyone's assigned to a specific role on like a production, right? You had the director, you had the boom operator, you had the sound guy. And it was like when the boom operator's arguing with the director, it's like, dude, that's not your job. Just shut the you know what up, right? Just let us.
Mhm.
And I couldn't stand the bickering. So I just said, that's it. You guys shoot your little movie. I want to go in the edit suite and I'll edit this thing. And I took picture editing and sound. So I was in the studio and editing. They didn't offer those together, but I made special arrangements with the coordinator because I said, look, I don't want to be on set. This is
Mhm.
where I feel comfortable. So he let me do it. So really, that was like learning how to manipulate media and things like that, in between sound and picture. And that really solidified my comfort in working with technology. And from there, it just, I had an opportunity before I graduated with a fledgling little video editing company that was, what they called nonlinear editing. It was like early days Avid video editing. So I went in there and volunteered for a year or so. And then that just building systems and stuff. I had no engineering background, but or programming background or anything, but I was this budding production guy. who wasn't afraid to open the computer and change cards and boards and stuff like that. So it helped me a lot as I moved through my career. We had a hard drive that was failing. I knew what to do. I could, while there was still some life in it, I knew how to save it and preserve our job and keep the session going and that. And I look back now, those days fondly. It forced me into learning, not just being a creative guy, which obviously I am, but I wasn't afraid of the technology side. So all the way through, even up till today, I've just been comfortable. I'm not going to program the next app or build my own website kind of thing, but I know enough that I can manipulate things and I can get by, and that's sort of like an extra tool that I have as a creator with a bit of technical savvy, right?
Cool, cool. Wow, that's awesome. You and I have talked. I'm not sure if I told you how I got into computers, but I've told this story before to someone else. I was always the tinkerer. I was always interested to find out how things worked. I wanted
Mm-hmm.
to take it apart and figure it out, but I had to wait until we got something new because I couldn't take apart what we were using, obviously. So whenever we got something new, I'd get the old thing and I would take it apart and try to figure out how it worked.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened with me with a computer. My aunt got a new computer. I think she got one. It came out with Windows 2000 or ME at the time, so I got her old 98 PC. And I wanted to take it apart, but it was a computer. In my mind, it's not. It's a serious thing. I was afraid, and I ended up going to a party. I didn't know the person who was hosting the party, but my friend invited me. And when I got to the party, he had computer parts laid out all over his house.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, why are there computer parts laid out all over? It doesn't make any sense. So when I got introduced to the guy, I asked him, why do you have computer parts laid out all over? He was like, oh, well, this is what I do. I repair computers. I said, that's funny. I was interested in computers. I wanted to know how they work, but I was afraid of messing it up because, it's a computer. It seems complicated. He says, no, it's simple. I'll show you. He has a pool table. We go over this pool table. He's got a tower open. He's got a motherboard laid out, and he basically shows me how the RAM clicks in and out, how the hard drive connects, and all of this, the processor and all this stuff. And when he's done, I'm thinking to myself, wait, that's it? You know, it's like Legos almost, you know, other than the stuff that has to solder, obviously.
Yeah.
So I ended up leaving the party early. I go back home, I look at the computer, and then I disassemble it. Every nut, bolt, piece, everything laid out all over the floor. I look at it for about 10 minutes, put it all back together again and turn it on. And when it worked, that was it. I
Yeah.
was hooked, and I started building a computer for me, building computers for other people. And I kept building computers. And then next thing you know, people were giving me their computers to fix. Something went wrong, this and that. I was a hardware guy. I learned enough about software to know how to install operating systems and, fix driver errors and blah, 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 blah. But, you know, you, you've got a lot of knowledge. There's some things that, maybe I could learn from you. I'd like to pick your brain one of these days.
Man, we talk often, anytime.
Yeah,
it's,
that's
it's
cool.
it's like it's an ongoing learning thing, right? And I've worked with a lot of like-minded people or in similar positions. Like when I was a full-time video editor, that was sort of my first professional job. Funny, I barely ever had a job actually since I got professional. I always like an independent, a contractor, or whatever. There was short stints where I was an employee, but I've worked with a lot of people in this industry, and that's just funny. I don't want me to bounce around, but back to college, and this is important. And if anyone's sort of younger, I don't know, old guys like me watching this, but I learned a valuable lesson by actually making a good decision, which usually it's the other way around. You got to make the mistake to learn that lesson. But I mentioned in college where I went into two very technical majors. It was video and sound. Because in the third year it was a 3-year program, and the third year you had to pick your two majors, and they wanted you to take one from this bucket and one from this bucket. And video and sound were in the same bucket, which is why they didn't want anyone taking those two courses together because they happened at the same semester. But I wasn't interested in script writing or directing or stuff. And there was always those guys that were like, they came into college and they wanted to be the director. And that's all they did is that I'm the director, I'm the director, I'm the director, I'm going to write the script, right? But they didn't learn any technical skills. Whereas I sort of was creative, and when I was doing independent projects, I was shooting and directing my own stuff, but I was more interested in how it all came together because that was also part of the work. So when it came to third year and I focused on two very technical roles, when I left, before I even graduated, I already had paid work. And years later, I was the senior video editor for this company I worked with for a number of years. And one day, who do I see working in the packaging department? The guy from my college who all he did was focus on directing and script writing. He could never get a job because he didn't have any tech. No one's going to hire you as a director. You can develop yourself into a filmmaker and be the director of your own stuff, but there's not like director jobs, right? I didn't know that, but it's just the fact that I stuck to technical things. I was in demand the day I walked out of college. Years later, he never got into the industry because he never could work, at a lower level and work up to that. And he was now packing boxes, and we went to the same program, right? So I learned, thankfully it was a good lesson I learned by making a good decision, is that, especially if you're getting into a media today, into a media field, which is everything now, having those technical skills to be able to make your own content, if you want to be creative, but build the foundation of technical know-how, because then you can be self-sufficient. And I know it's different today. I don't want to sound like back in my day, but I mean, today a lot of apps are assuming the role of being technical because you don't have to think about it. And I think that's kind of dangerous because it kind of makes you redundant. You can push a few buttons and use an app and call it your thing. But there's a lot of very creative people and very highly technical people out there still today. And those are the people that can make something of themselves. And I worry, especially I have kids and I see them using apps that will edit for them or will make music for them. And I keep encouraging them to learn. I said, even if it's one thing, just pick one thing that you're good at. You know, if there's something I'm not good at and there's something that can help me at this point in my life, sometimes I still take the time to try and learn that thing, but I obviously can't learn everything. So that's where I see modern apps and things as good, useful tools, but not to replace my core skills. So I think that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I tell everyone, find, like you said, find something you're good at. And if there is a way for you to solve a problem, to help people, use the knowledge that you have to do so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I'll give you one example, like a practical example is I assume a million roles on my channel. Like I play guitar, I play bass, I write songs, I record, I mix, I write the scripts for my episodes. I stand in front of the camera. I light it. I edit everything.
Mhm.
I master the music. I do a lot. I do the graphics. I do the special effects. I assume the role of a lot of people. But there's one thing that I can't do is I can't draw. And if I need an image, I can steal it off of Google. Or today you can go to one of those AI platforms and say, I need a warehouse with a computer in the middle. And I get something that's
Mhm.
not someone else's image. I have no shame at that point because I already do a lot of things on my own, and I'm not going to spend the next few months learning how to draw because at this point in my life, I'm not interested in doing that. So either I hire someone to do, which obviously in the YouTube world, you can't do that. Well, you could if you're, but at my size, you can't. So that's where something like AI will come in handy for me. If I just need a specific image and it's an illustration or of some sort, and I can't draw,
Mhm.
then I could use a tool to help me get that one little image. The video is not about the image. The image is supporting something that I'm talking about or a sound that I'm, whatever. That's a tool, right? At least, and that's my opinion. Someone might think I'm wrong, but I think that's okay. But if my core skill is as an artist and I get lazy and I start using AI to paint my pictures for me, that's a huge problem as far as I see it, because now you're relying on technology to do your job. And the industry may be going that way and we might not be able to stop it, but you know I don't think the whole adage, if you can't beat them join them, applies in this case, because you're going to make yourself redundant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I don't believe in that. If you can't beat them, join them thing. I think you should find a way to stay true to yourself, uh, and do you, because a lot of artists, they just get frustrated because they're not getting the results they want with the music that they make, and they try to make commercialized music to get more sales,
Yeah.
and it doesn't always work for them. It fails because you can tell that it's not what they really want to do. If you stay true to yourself and do what you really want to do, maybe you can find something in commercial music that you um, can appreciate. For example, pop music or techno or dance or whatever. Maybe there's certain elements in that music that you can actually appreciate, you can implement that into what you do to where you can make something that's like a dance rock or pop rock or something. It doesn't have to be all the time, but you can do something like that where you can draw more people in, but you're still staying true to yourself, doing what you do. So there's so many ways around it. You can ride that line to a certain degree. Speaking, go ahead.
I would say one of my biggest fears. Listen, I wish nothing but success for my kids. I want them to see them successful, but I really encourage them to learn. But they are in an era where the audience knowledge level is a lot more simplistic because they're conditioned to enjoy what they hear in popular culture today, and a lot of which
Mhm.
is music that was generated through digital platforms. Some people are doing it with their own hands, but other people are using loops and things like that, and the audience can't tell the difference. If they like
Mhm.
something and it makes them dance or whatever, oh, that's fire, right?
Mhm.
So one of my biggest fears, and again, I want to make this clear, I want my kids to be massively successful, and if they can be 100% more successful than me, I'd be so proud of them. But one of my biggest fears is that they would go against what my philosophy of learning something, refusing to learn anything, relying on
Mhm.
AI and all this digital stuff, and then write a banger and just go huge, far bigger, like a YouTube channel than I ever did, based on all of the things that I just don't believe in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Again, if it happened to him, I would be very proud of him, and if it made him feel satisfied and fulfilled. But at the same time, it's one of my biggest fears that my kids will succeed doing something that I think is something they shouldn't do. You know what I mean? So it's not
Yeah.
illegal, so it's not like I'd have to worry about it in that sense. But you know what I mean, right? Like, come on,
Yeah.
learn how to edit. Hey, Dad, I don't have to learn how to edit. This app is doing it for me. I'm done. Look, I got 1 million views on this video, and I spent 10 minutes making it, and I spent 5 days making mine, and maybe I got 10,000 views. But hey, whatever
Well,
makes whatever makes you feel good.
a lot of stuff happens that way. When I started Creative Devices, a lot of people were telling me that I was crazy. It's never going to work. You wasted your money, blah, 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 blah. It was nothing but negativity, you know. And then there was everyone saying, Windows. Who's going to use Windows? Everyone that does creative stuff uses a Mac, which is not true. A lot of people do, but. So I listened to everyone. I said, okay, well, thank you for your input. But at the same time, I understand that even though Mac is good, and you can relate because you're a Mac user yourself.
I've been waiting for
And
this chapter.
I've used Mac myself. I know why I choose Windows over Mac, and I know why a lot of other people choose Windows over Mac, and there are different reasons. One of the reasons is I don't like limitations.
Mhm.
For someone else, it could be that. For someone else, it could be maybe they're starting out and they can't afford a Mac. You know, there could be so many reasons why, but at the end of the day, there's still so much. Everywhere you go, from schools to businesses to everywhere, all the majority of primary computing devices still use Windows. Now, during the XP days, a lot of people switched over from Windows to Mac because the early renditions of XP wasn't that stable. The power in the computers at the time weren't that great, and you'd get a lot of blue screens and a lot of crashes and a lot of whatever, whatever. So people switched over to Mac because they wanted something that was more stable. Apple used hardware devices that only worked well together, and they made sure that the software worked with it. They created custom drivers, et cetera, et cetera. At the time, and still today, anyone can make hardware devices for Windows. It doesn't mean that they're all going to be compatible. So that's the issues that we had back then with XP. XP didn't become more stable until Service Pack 3. That's when you could actually use it, for whatever you wanted. Then Vista, then 7, everyone had its issues. When Windows 10 came out, by the end of 7, it was stable. And when Windows 10 came out, it was stable. I didn't really notice any issues. The times I went to Apple was for different reasons. I was trying out different things. I was testing different DAWs. I tested Logic. I tested um, just about every DAW that's on the market. I tested, and I've always found my way back to Windows because it's just easier to use for me. I have less hoops to jump through. Everything I want is either right there in front of me or right click away. Same thing with the DAWs that I choose. And I'm not saying anything bad about either system, but for me, I know the reasons why I choose them, and I know a lot of other people feel the same way. So there's so many reasons why, Windows works. And I know a lot of people are going to be able to appreciate that. Also, again, the limitations. Mac is a closed system. There's so much that you just cannot do with it. And again, the price. So whether you can afford one or not, if you can't afford one, you're looking at Windows. Even if you can afford one, but you don't like the limitations, you're looking at Windows. And for a lot of these boutique only programs and plugins, the majority of them are Windows. There's so many reasons why. So that's why I decided I know this is going to work. No one's focused on creators, they're focused on gamers. But there's a lot of creative people out there and a lot of wannabe creative people out there that just don't have what they want, you know? No one else is giving them what they want. Everyone else is saying, here are your options. Pay too much money for one of these. You can't actually have what you want. So once I realized that, I said, I can't be the only one. And thankfully, I'm not. There's a lot of other people out there who want what they want, how they want it, and they don't want to spend a whole lot of money for it, for something that's powerful enough to help them get their creative ideas across.
Listen, if I was coming into the game now, or if I was early in my journey, I mean, you and I, we talk about this a lot, but for purposes of this podcast, I don't identify as a Mac guy. I never have. Just because I use a Mac doesn't make me a Mac guy. You know what I mean? I remember I thought about this because I knew, of course, we were going to talk about this. Because I was, shall I say, I owned a PC before I got my first Mac. I was happy with that. I built that PC. Talk about building. I went to a store. I bought all the components. I put it together. I chose my tower, my case, my CPU, my RAM, everything, my hard drive. And I love getting in there and changing things, adding more RAM when I needed to. Even my early Macs, like the towers, I was able to get in, change hard drives and stuff. I love doing that. We can't do that today. We'll get to that in a second. But what prompted me to move, it wasn't so much a move, is around that time, and I guess we're talking around the early 90s or mid 90s, is that Apple had Firewire. And there was mini DV cameras, and natively you could take a mini DV camera and just plug it right into your Mac, and it was just built for video. It was so easy. There was no thought involved. I know Windows was a bit behind on that trend, right? So, because you needed to have a separate card and all that, and it was happening on Mac first, and it was a very seamless process. So I was a video editor. I was working as a video editor. By that point, I had a little production company. We were producing music videos, and my business partner at the time actually brought in one of the iMacs, and we were just using it for demo reels and stuff, and a little bit of editing. But we had also had an Avid. We had bought a low-end Avid at the time, which was also Mac. All of this stuff was only available on Mac at the time. So a guy like me who came up through the production industry in the 90s, if you were doing video and stuff, you were on a Mac. That's just how it was. Today it's different, right? Obviously everything is cross-platform. You've got all the connections you need. You want Thunderbolt on a PC, you can build that from scratch and have Thunderbolt. It's not. But that's why guys like me started using Mac. It was like, I'm a Mac guy because I like it better. It was just seamless. I'll tell you, you plug it in, it just worked. That was sort of their marketing. But as a user back then, so I ended up getting my first Mac because I started wanting to work at home. And when my business fell apart with that guy, and he took the Mac with him, and I missed the ability of editing my own stuff. I ended up getting it was a G5 at the time. It was the G5 towers. And yeah, and it just sort of went from there. So today it's just because I've been using it for so long. But I've never been against the idea of a PC, and that's what actually prompted me to reach out to you originally. I saw you were on my friend John's channel. He got one of your laptops, and he spoke very highly of you, and I was like, I was having some problems. Hey, things that weren't working well on the Mac, right? Um, as you said, one of the problems with the modern day, I have the Apple Mac Studio, and it's a great little box. It's not cheap. I came from the trash can Mac, which was a horrible piece of engineering. It was good for about 5 minutes until it started bogging down, and I couldn't upgrade the internal hard drive was puny, and I heard that you couldn't upgrade them. There were upgrade kits, but a Mac guy told me be careful. He's seen those things brick when people were just trying to upgrade the hard drive, and it was like, oh god. And then it started becoming really slow. So I jumped on the first Mac Studio when they first came out. And it's an integrated system, and I don't like that because before I had the trash can, I have had a couple of the towers, the Mac Pro towers, and I love those. They're big, and you can get inside. And suddenly they became integrated. I don't like that. Now I assume the Apple Silicon, it's an integrated system, and I guess having your audio and your GPU and CPU all integrated on a chip, I'm sure there's efficiency there because everything's so tight and packed and all integrated. I'm assuming from an engineering standpoint, there's some efficiency there that can't be replicated with a data cable. Okay, I get that. But from someone who is a tinkerer, we started this conversation about I like to tinker. Suddenly I couldn't tinker. Oh, you got to add the RAM that you think you're going to need in the future and now because you can't order it later. So all right, let's put 64 gigs of RAM on a machine where you probably don't need more than 24 to 48, but let's do it now because I need to build runway for this computer. I don't like that. Apple, I have to say though, they did step up. They replaced my Mac Studio. I was having some issues, and they gave me a brand new M2. So they actually upgraded me for free. And it turns out I don't think there was ever a problem with that old Mac because I'm still having the same issues now. It's a software issue. Hey, I got a new machine, no complaints. They upgraded me for free. But again, I still don't identify as a Mac guy. But I reached out to you. It's beautiful, Kreative Devices. He's not paying me to say that. Because there's some applications that are reliant upon the GPU. Like ToneX is something that I do a lot of content for IK Multimedia ToneX and doing tone model captures. See my amps back here. I like to capture the amps. The rendering time on a Mac it's impossible. You want to render a tone model. It was taking 2 to 3 hours for each one. The reason is that the software has been optimized for the NVIDIA video card. So I was at that point, if I wanted to do more tone models and things like that, I just wasn't doing it because I can't do it on my Mac. If you want to make a pack of 10 amplifiers, you're looking at 30 to 40 hours of rendering time. No, I can't do that. That's cost prohibitive at that point. So as a creative professional, I need something, but I do have standards now. I can't get some cheap PC that just got a better video card just to do ToneX. I figured I needed something that could maybe offload some of the things that I'm doing on my main system. And I saw, your stuff through, and people should know that you didn't reach out to me looking to stick your computer on my channel. I actually reached out to you, right? And thankfully you responded, and we've built our relationship from there. So, this has been a great machine for that application. It may not be the machine that I'm mixing my music or editing my videos on right now, but it's slowly going to be becoming my mobile setup because I traveled with my MacBook Pro this summer, and it's okay. It's a slightly older one. But man, it let me down. It wasn't working. So I'm already tailoring this because I'll be back on the road this summer, taking the channel on the road, and I want to be able to edit. So I've already got I use DaVinci Resolve to edit my videos, and I already have it set up here. And I'm slowly moving over a workflow here. So it's handling all the ToneX captures now. You can see partially. It's sitting on a cart here. Got a Line 6 Helix driving it now for audio and all the signal routing and stuff. So, I mean, think about it. You got a Helix routed into this thing. I got the ToneX capture box. I got all the sound here, all contained on one cart. But when I got to take off and I want to have a really powerful portable video editing system, she comes off with me. And it'll be a seamless integration from what I'm doing on the main system. It really doesn't matter now because the platform is not Mac or PC. It's DaVinci Resolve because that's what I'm working on, and it's cross-compatible, right? So, and it's been great, So if I was just getting into it now, in Canadian dollars, would I want to go spend $6,000 on a Mac Studio? No, not going to happen, right? I only did it because I was already in there and it was an upgrade, and I'm going to use it for 5-6 years. So amortize that over 6 years. If you already got a bit of an income coming in, okay, 6,000 doesn't seem like such a big deal anymore because there's income. But if I'm getting started, I wouldn't recommend anyone spend $6,000 on a computer. It's not worth it. And for a third of the price, I mean, I'll tell you right now, those 3-hour renders, and this is a GPU thing. It's not a power thing, but
Mm.
just to be honest. But this machine at a less than a third of the price of that desktop Mac machine was chewing through those same renders in about 12 minutes. So the power's here, the compatibility's here. It runs. The only software it doesn't run is my DAW. So, but everything else, if I got to run my graphic editing program, my video editing program, it's all one and the same, and a lot less money, right? So, I wouldn't hesitate to, if someone was getting started, or just looking to go independent and have their own machine. You'll get a lot done with this.
Thank you, thank you. Appreciate your kind words. Well, you basically summed it all up, and I know that you're a Logic user. That's why you said the only thing that doesn't work is your DAW, because Logic is Apple only.
Yeah.
And we're gonna have to get you over to Studio One or Sonar or something like that. And
I've dabbled. It's on here. I've dabbled. It's just learning a new DAW is daunting. Daunting. It's I changed video editors a couple of years, less than 2 years ago. I moved to DaVinci Resolve from Avid Media Composer, and I was really worried because I had been working on Avid for like 25 years or something like that, and that's like my left hand, and switching that in the middle of a production cycle was a very, very scary thing. But I did it, and I'm really glad that I did. I don't feel the need to change my DAW just because I have a million projects that I recall all the time. So if I can't move it over to that's the only thing that's stopping me. But and then again, it's not a testament to the machine. It's like, okay, I'd have to re-record 100, 150 music projects if I want to recall, or am I going to work on both now? Okay, those ones will be here. So the thought of that's the only thing that's stopping me. It's not a technical thing. It's not a comfort thing. It's not, the Mac's not nothing. It's just like, as I said, I'm no spring chicken. Every minute counts for me now. And I assume every roll in every video that I make that adding more tasks to my task list is going to mean less video output. Right. So really that's the only thing. But like I said, if I was just starting right now and setting up my studio and stuff like that for $6,000, if I could put like a third of that on the computer, that's going to leave me $4,000 to put, a DAW controller, some more software, another guitar, maybe a tube amp. Why would I spend all that money on one computer? It's not giving me anything more, and it's still sluggish at times. It's even the new M2. I'm finding it's still sluggish at times. So, power per dollar, I'm not getting it on the Mac.
I mean,
And
nothing.
I'm apparently a Mac guy, right?
Well, like I said before, nothing is perfect, right? There is no perfect device, just like there's no perfect person. You're gonna run into something eventually. But there's a buddy of mine who was a Mac user, and he still uses his Mac from time to time. But he got one of our devices, and it's been his main device for probably a couple years now.
Yeah.
Like you, he was into Logic, and he switched over to Studio One. And from the time he started doing all his recordings in Studio One, was for the same reason that you said. He didn't want to have to worry about going back and forth. So for the old stuff, if he needs to access it, he'll go access it on his Mac in Logic. But since he switched over, everything he's done from that day on was in Studio One. So now all the recent stuff is in Studio One, which can be ran on both platforms. So if he ever has to open it up on a Mac somewhere or on his Creative Devices laptop, he can. So there's always ways, not necessarily trying to, push you in that direction, but I'm just saying if you ever decide, maybe you want to start moving along, it's an option for you. There you go.
Well, it's
But
already assuming an integral role here. I mean, the studio is growing. I mean, the functionality is growing here. Actually, just this week, I can't see it. I got a Neve style 2-channel preamp with EQ, first time.
nice.
So I mean, that was a little dream of mine. I mean, you have to have a lot of dreams, and I'm not so independently wealthy that I bought all this on the same day. This has been accumulating for years. But one of my quiet little dreams, and not being a studio that rents its services out to outside, so everything I buy is a cost associated with what I'm doing on YouTube. always wanted a good analog front end for my studio, and I have a lot of gear so I offloaded a couple of things, some mixing things that I wasn't using anymore, some controllers I sold and traded in, and turned it into a nice Neve style, like a 2 channel
Mm-hmm.
preamp with EQ, and and I love that. So that expansion is in progress. This thing here, why do you need two computers? Well, I have another laptop like the MacBook Pro, but I'm able to offload some critical functions now
Mm-hmm.
off of the main system. So if I'm in the middle of editing or processing something, I can have something going on here. And it's again being one person here, having other outlets, other, platforms that are working on things for me. Like I call this the Tonex cart. I do other things with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just for Tonex, but it's a standalone capture system, which I do a lot of here, and I've
Mm-hmm.
wired it so it's all self-contained. Because when you're in a studio and you got to do this and that, you got to pull this cable and that, all of a sudden you have a mess, right? So
Mm-hmm.
this way I can keep the main desk as it's set up and
Mm-hmm.
offload certain tasks to here. I've designed it to do those tasks, and it's created an amazing layer of efficiency for me here, like just having this here. And like I said, for traveling,
Mm-hmm.
it's smaller than the MacBook Pro. It's at least the one I had, anyways. So easy to carry around and got a lot of horsepower here. And I, got to edit some videos on the plane. And when I'm away and putting out those shorts while I was away, I failed miserably on the last trip. What I'd set up didn't work. I had a lot of problems. So I've been already grooming this for those tasks. To take it on the road. Obviously, not going to be mixing any of my music on the road, but that's not the plan. I can keep the videos. I can keep the videos going. So, yeah.
Well, I was talking to our good friend Henning, and he was wondering what could he use because he's a Mac user like yourself, and he's thinking he likes the machine, but why would he use a Windows machine when he's been using Mac for so long? But then we started talking about your video about the Tonex renders. He wants to make Tonex renders as well. He likes the idea of being able to edit videos uh, at 4K or higher on the go. There's certain pieces of gear that he has that doesn't work on Mac. They're Windows only, the software.
Hmm.
And the fact that he can also, if he want to, play some games on it, he likes the idea of that. And the amount of storage you can have inside the machine itself versus what Apple will allow.
Yeah.
So he was like, you know what? I like it. I'll have to get one. And he got one. So
That's
excited
good.
about that. We'll probably all be editing videos, at 42 Gear Street, on our similar laptop, well, on our same laptops. It's going to be pretty interesting to see. And I'm smiling because I'm looking now back on the people who told me I was insane. No one's ever going to want this. And now we're talking about us and other people who are using these devices. So,
Hey man, you got to be a little crazy to be successful, right? Because you got to, look, nothing in life is guaranteed, but tried and true is not interesting.
mhm.
And tried and true is readily available too, right? So, the fact that you had a vision, and look, you can't build aftermarket Macs, so that wasn't even an option, right? And even I remember the short time that there were aftermarket Macs. It was a very short window of time that was a thing.
Mhm.
So PC is your jam, and it's the only platform that's available to do what you do and to make it work. Um, and you identified a need, right?
Mhm.
A lot of people are looking, and in an age where a lot of people are using their cell phones for everything, you can't be a professional creator unless you're working on a computer.
Yes.
And if you're getting in, I get it. It seems expensive. iPhones are not cheap. Probably the same price as your laptop, but people pay it off monthly, and they don't really get a sense that these are $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 devices, right? Um, and actually, I will say this. Speaking of Gear Street, because one of my strategies was to shoot on my phone while I was away. I didn't bring my DSLR with me. I had a GoPro and I had my phone, and I had planned to use a gimbal. Never again will I use my phone as my camera, because okay, if I had another phone that was dedicated to just be A camera?
Mm.
Maybe. But I had so many issues using my phone as my principal camera for this trip. And I was so frustrated. I had storage issues because I have all the apps on my phone. I didn't want to delete them. If I had an empty phone with a full capacity, maybe. But never, ever again will I use my phone on the road as my
Mm.
principal camera. It caused me so much grief. I'll tell you that right now. So I got a second DSLR this year. I'll bring the older one with me. I'll fire it into the Creative Devices laptop for editing. I know it's going to be such a smoother experience. And you can't be a pro if you're shooting videos on this. I don't care. As good as it looks, iPhone doesn't look good. When you go throw it into editing, it's not. I was really disappointed with the video quality actually. So yeah, just saying. But so the thought of like the investment into this, it's a no brainer because it's going to work. You
Yeah.
know, I can't even imagine. I know people are editing videos on their phone. No.
Well, I have a Galaxy S23 Ultra. I
Yeah.
don't upgrade all the time. You know, only maybe I'll upgrade to the newer Sony whenever it comes out. The only reason I got this phone was because it shoots 8K, and if I want to, I can shoot something in 8K and then render it that way or bounce it down to 4K, whatever I want. The quality of videos that you get from these Samsung devices or Sony devices, you know, I like the quality and the ease of use and stuff like that. A lot of people, yes, iPhones are great, you know, and again, I'm not saying I'm not anti-Apple. Some people might think I am. I'm not. But Android devices, just like Windows, you don't have those limitations. You can do so much customizing, and so many different devices have incredible quality cameras on them where it's like it's almost like you're shooting with a DSLR. It's crazy when you look at the quality of the footage. So if you had a device like one of these Android phones, you could use it to shoot, and it has enough internal storage. And depending on the one you have, you might even be able to put a micro SD card in there to add more storage, and
Yeah.
that could just be your main thing. You could edit on the phone itself or just plug it into the computer and, you know, do your
Actually,
editing
I,
there.
I bought. I had a whole plan. A couple of things that I didn't know. So when I say your phone, now the iPhone, what I learned the hard way, sucks in low light. That's where I found the limitation. When I was at John's studio, you know, we had a couple lights on, but it's kind of dimly lit in there, which I like. You know, this kind of moody look is kind of my thing, right? It was so grainy. It would looked horrible. So I bought a little adapter here, you know, so you can plug
Mhm.
in and sort of an external storage for the iPhone, which goes in
Mm.
through the Lightning connector. This is a 14, so it took the Lightning, and so I put that in there. And it wasn't until after I bought it that the transfer time to get it onto that card or off of that card
Mm.
was pain. I'm talking like I was waiting an hour, 2 hours, hour and a half getting the data off of that thing. And I was like, everything that I had planned went wrong. But the most important
Mm.
thing is the footage that I shot in low light. Outside looks beautiful. Okay.
Mm.
Not going to complain. But the stuff that I shot indoors in minimal lighting, not no lighting, there was some lighting there, looked absolutely terrible. I put two videos I released on my channel and I was really self conscious about it because I take pride in a good looking image. And it was not a good looking image. It looked terrible. So, anyways, I mean, I know the phones have come a long way and it's certainly an efficient way. But, you know, to me, if you're making content, tablets and phones, as far as they've come as production tools,
Mm.
they're still consumption devices as far as I see them. And you know, if you're a real serious creator, then you need to get your hands on a computer. You can even take this. You could hook it up to a bigger monitor if you have one. Kick back, experience the work that you're making. Like that's what it. Like I've tried to emulate what it was like to go into those production studios, and you just feel
Mm.
that the smell of the room and everything. It's kind of a lost art these days, unfortunately. And I get
Yeah.
it; we're all product of our experiences, but it's something about that creative space to me. And is that nostalgia for me? Maybe, but I don't know. Just I can't do the big things that I do on a phone. I need a laptop. I need a computer.
Mm.
Yeah. I need a desktop
Absolutely.
solution. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. You know, that's again, that's what we tried to create, desktop replacement laptops. We wanted something as powerful as a desktop, but portable. and that's what our devices are. And so a lot of guys have been asking us about the Tonex stuff since your video.
Oh, really?
And yeah, the G16 is the laptop that everyone has a lot of questions about. But luckily, the A16 works just as well
Hmm.
because the AMD graphics will also work just as well as the NVIDIA graphics. So as
Hmm.
long as you're not dealing with mainly internal graphics, I haven't actually tested one of our audio only laptops to see how well, like, let's say the Intel graphics will work. So I don't know, but I know the AMD graphics work well also
Good.
for rendering.
Good to know.
But it's crazy because Apple used to have NVIDIA and AMD cards in their machines years
Yeah.
ago, and
Yeah.
they stopped all of that. They got rid of them. They got rid of Intel. You know, they want to do everything internally, and sometimes you need something else.
Listen, they identified their market, and the integration of their software and their hardware, it's pretty seamless. I mean, when you have it just works, and that's always sort of been their philosophy. And I'm sure they evaluated the cost of doing that.
Mhm.
And look, as someone like me that is a tinkerer too, and historically has been a tinkerer too, there's a part of my brain that's like, okay, I don't have to think about that anymore.
Mhm.
I miss it, but sometimes you gotta really focus on what it is that you need to do. So I miss it sometimes, but the Apple, it's in another. You don't even see it in my room. It's in a machine room. I never see the machine itself, so it's not like I'm looking at I'm on my 43-inch monitor and my secondary, 20, 30 inch, or whatever it is. That's what I see. I don't see the Mac. Okay, I see the desktop, but I'm in DaVinci. I'm in Logic. I'm not like staring at the operating system. I'm just doing my thing. It's kind of like over there. So, but I think I lost my point there for a second. My point is, it's not so in my face anymore, right? It's
Right,
like,
right,
is it getting the job done? And the fact that I don't
right.
have to tinker, you know.
Yeah.
So, but I guess maybe that's not a fair observation because I have this guy sitting beside me, and I get to have the fun here, right? So, uh, hey, if you get to that next level, you gotta expand, right? Got to keep an
Mhm.
open mind and just use the tools that work for you.
Well, we try to do the same thing with our mini PCs. We wanted to make sure that people had something that you don't have to look at. It can mount behind your monitor, it can mount under your desk, it can be completely out of the way. You don't even notice that the thing is there.
Hmm.
And it works pretty well. You know, we're very happy with the mini. A lot of people seem to like it, and I'm excited. We have our Intel version and the AMD version. The AMD version is my favorite because the AMD graphics are more powerful than the Intel graphics,
Hmm.
and they do a lot. They do a lot. I'm actually I have an A16 myself now, and I find myself using that even more than my G16. And
But
I love the G16, but you don't always need all of that. Like the main thing for the G16 for me is that RTX graphics card. If you don't necessarily need that RTX graphics card, you know, it's still a great machine. I love it, but I don't know. I'm liking but the extra cooling requires a little more on the back end. So it's still slim, but just a little bit, more. So if you try to put it in just a sleeve, you're gonna have a little bit of a fight to get it in the sleeve, but it will get in there. But I love it for gaming. The render times when I'm editing video, especially high quality video, and the fact that you can even push it to do like 6K and 8K video. It's crazy to think that you can do this on a laptop. Like
mm,
that's one of the things that I really love. Like you can do this on a laptop, showing people, look, we're scrubbing through 8K footage on a laptop and it's smooth. Who would have thought that something like that would have been possible? You know what I mean? So It's just
Not where
it's
I come
beautiful.
from.
Right. And
People
for
are
the
growing up in this
price.
now. People are growing up in this now. It's like whatever, right? But I've seen the evolution of this, and it's exciting. I feel fortunate that I've lived through this, and I'm still doing this. A lot of guys that I went to school with or even worked with as little as 10 years ago are not in the industry anymore. I evolved. I broke out of television, but I remember being in college and HD wasn't even available for consumers yet. And we sat in a lecture about HD, and one of the original mandates for high definition was to create a unified standard, because at the time, in the NTSC, well, the NTSC era, the Western world using NTSC broadcast standard, video standard, and then in Europe, parts of Europe using PAL, and then a lesser known one was called CCAM. PAL has a different frame rate. It's was it 25 frames per second?
Mm.
NTSC was 29.97 frames per second. So as a consumer, you don't care. But if you would go to Europe and watch TV, it always had a little bit of a flicker. The reason was it was at a slower frame rate than
Mm.
Western television. But then there's the image of the frame. So the idea of HD originally, one of the was, okay, to improve the standard and to create a universal standard. Because when you were in production and you were making videos for worldwide release, okay, I'm shooting in NTSC, but then I have to convert it to PAL. That wasn't a perfect science because you were going from the 29.97 to 25 frames. We're getting real geeky here, but this was the producers. These were things they were costs that they had to think about at the time. So the funny thing was, it's all based on the manufacturers and what they end up supporting. Like JVC was VHS. If you think back even before the VHS and Betacam, Sony Betacam was a far better platform and far better quality. People used to laugh, "Oh, he got Beta. He was like he ostracized that guy. He was an outsider." But Beta was far better quality than VHS. The reason VHS survived was it had mass acceptance was as they licensed that technology to other manufacturers, where Sony kept it proprietary. But what a lot of people don't know is the beta format actually became the professional standard. You had Betacam and
Mm.
digital Betacam; those were the professional standards. So they made it in the professional world. It was the same kind of shape, um, but that universal standard never happened because all the different manufacturers wanted to go with 1080p, 1080i, 720. There was all the different HD standards. So the thing that changed everything is when all the video creation tools and the hardware software solutions developed something that's called being resolution independent. So it didn't matter anymore because in the old days, if you started an editing project, it had to be a certain format. Oh, it's NTSC, certain frames per second, whatever. Now you load footage into DaVinci Resolve. It doesn't care if it's standard def, HD, 4K, 8K. It can mix all of those resolutions and throw them on one timeline and convert it
Mm.
immediately, right? That's a luxury we didn't have back in the day, and people take that for granted because they don't think about that. Because all those standard, these operating systems, these platforms are resolution independent. It's just made it so easy they don't even have to think about it anymore. But those used to be big hard costs.
Mm. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that we take for granted today. Just just like there's people. I was having a conversation with Chris from High Impact Audio
Hmm.
about how there's people who've never played a tube amp. He said he never played a Marshall, and that was pretty funny. But there's people who've still never played a tube amp. It's just they don't know what an amp sounds and feels like. They don't understand the difference.
That's a crying shame. I love these things. I know we're near the end of our podcast. We haven't even talked about it. Like
I know.
we were going to talk about the 900, but it's owning something like this. This is a prized possession. Is
Mhm.
it as flexible as my fractal? No, it's not. But it's a different thing. It's such an experience to own something like this. And the privilege I have to own a few, and that some companies are sending them to me now, which is like I can't tell you how honored I am to represent, like that flashing red one, the Tube Workshop.
Mhm.
Lewis, love that amp. It's a prized possession. It's a joy to play. Learning how to tame it and and own it. Because it can be angry some days. It could be and unfortunately, the kids growing up today, they can get a free plug-in and get those distortion tones and feel like they're playing rock and roll, which
Yeah.
they are. And I think that there's a good side to that. But until you get your hands on one, but the thing is, when they do, it's a game changer for people. And I'm actually in the process of going to be doing something soon on the channel that will be in that spirit of that, getting some kids who've never played a tube amp get their hands on mine and see what they think. So
But I
that's
am
a
curious about your 900 story. I want to know how you felt about the Marshall JCM 900. That's what we're talking about.
yeah. So the JCM 900, which is hiding down there, I don't know if you can see it. So yeah, it's right down there. It's not lit, but it was my first tube amp. And to be honest, when I started my channel, I only had one tube amp. So I had the JCM 900. I have two Marshall 4x10 cabinets. I used to gig with the 900 and a single 410. I got the 410 just because it fit in my car better than the 412. That's it. It's a bit snappier. Still sounds great. Um, can't say that I knew a lot about it. It was just the amp that I bought. I bought it used for $600 in the 90s. Now, as I got to know more about amps and as my collection has grown a little bit, I don't consider myself necessarily an expert per se. But I did a video it's a couple years ago now, actually, where I did the title of the video was the JCM versus JCM 900 debate is just dumb. And that video 2 years later or whatever is still getting views. It's stimulated so much back and forth and comments and things, and you have people who hate the 900 and people who love it, and then people who hate the 800, and it's like it's dumb because Marshall has the predominant model was the JCM 800, JCM 900, but there's a model number that's a lot smaller. That's where the differences lie, because a lot of people don't like the 900 because they said it has diode clipping. What's diode clipping? You find that in a distortion pedal, right? The 900 existed because back in those days, all those guys in the 80s using 800s were getting heavier. They wanted more gain, and they couldn't get it out of the 800s. So they were modifying the 800s to give them more saturation, give them more distortion that the 800 couldn't do.
Hmm.
So Marshall's response to that was the 900. They threw some what people call op amps and diode clipping. I don't even understand all that stuff, but I actually had some diode clipping removed from this particular one. But the thing is, and I did a follow-up video about the 900. It's not an 800. Just like the 800 is not a Plexi or a Jubilee, right? It's a different amp. And comparing the amps, it's like, okay, it's a fun thing to do, but when people start arguing about it and insulting you over it, it's silly. The 900 is a very gainy amp. Now, it's called a high gain amp, compared to an Angle or something like that. No, it's a different type of high gain. But for a particular type of sound, like if you think about that pop punk era in the 90s and those guitar tones, a lot of those guys were using 900s. And I proved that in the video that I did, where when I wanted that sound, I got that sound. But I'll tell you something, the clean channel on this 900, this is the 50-watt version, I think the model 4500, I think. It has an amazing clean channel. It's that, you can put pedals into that thing and drive it into breakup. It's beautiful. And then the high gain channel itself is gain for days. And if you pair that with the right speaker cabinet or the right IR, if you're going direct, I had the diode clipping removed because it was my early days of direct recording. I'm using load boxes and stuff. It's funny, I'm getting back into cabinets now, but I was hearing things that I hadn't heard before, and I was just getting more intimate with the amp, because when you're recording direct, you're hearing it more intimately.
Mm-hmm.
So I started tinkering with it. I took it in to be retubed, and the guy told me about this modification that was cheap, and said, "Oh, let's give it a try." I almost wish I didn't do it because it's not stock anymore, but it sounds really good. And you like I said, put that through a good cabinet or pick the right IR. And if you're looking for a particular tone, it's going to get the job done for you. Yeah, if you want it to replace a Mesa Boogie or something like that, it's not going to do the job because that's not what it was built to do. It has its own thing. It's not an 800. It's not trying to be an 800. It's not trying to be anything else but a 900. And Marshall still makes them. And Marshall just introduced the 900 Studio, because there is a big audience still for the 900. Some people think it's the worst Marshall. It's not the worst Marshall. It's probably gets the worst. Maybe the MOSFET 100 was the worst Marshall, solid state Marshall head. Maybe,
I think
probably.
so.
But
Yeah.
the 900 is a tube amp. It does its thing well, and it's got gain for days. And if you learn how to use it and treat it right, it's going to give you some really, really nice tones. And I think it's silly to call it a bad amp, because it's not. I've recorded that amp a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not a bad amp, and as I told Chris, you definitely can dial in some good tones with a 900. You just have to know how. a lot of people, especially back then, everything was just crank it up, and it's not like an 800 or a plexi. You know, you're not going to get a decent sound if you just crank a 900 like that. You have to tailor the sound of a 900.
What about a Mesa Boogie? People talk about, was it the 2C Plus or whatever, or or the Mesa Boogies with the 5 band EQ on there? Like you
Uh,
have to know how to
yeah,
dial it in, otherwise it doesn't
yeah,
sound good. Didn't
right.
Gibson, well, that owns Mesa now, drop the ball with the new reissues of Mesas, and their first demos they put on YouTube, they sounded terrible because the guys that were in the room didn't have enough time to dial them in. They sounded like shit, and it got a bad rap. Some people are calling it the worst launch ever because they needed to take the time to find the sweet spot on the amp. That's the same. That is the same for many amplifiers. You don't
Hmm.
just plug in, turn it on, and there's your sound. It doesn't work that way. I've got some hand wired amps here that are like the best thing I ever played. I still got to tinker with it to find the sound that I'm looking for. It's not like I plug in and oh glory hallelujah, there it is, right? No,
Absolutely.
right. And that's the beauty of an amplifier, because an amp has a personality, right? It depends on how you're feeling that day. There's a reaction to what, and I know you know this, but just for someone who may still be here in the 1.5 hours into our
Hmm.
podcast, it's a reactionary thing. It's an emotional thing, right? Each amp
Yeah,
has its limits, but a lot of these amps have a much wider range than people give them credit for.
yeah.
And when you're sitting here in a studio environment, when you can take the time to experiment with them, I mean, I bought this Angle because I wanted a high gain amp. I didn't realize how sweet this thing sounded clean in crunch mode. Like I didn't buy it to be a good edge of breakup amp. But holy
Right.
shit, it does that really, really well. But it takes time to learn the amp and figure out the sweet spots. Say, hey, wow, it can do that. So every amp deserves its due. And yeah, there are bad amps out there, of course, right? The 900 is not one of them. I'll tell you that. And I'm going to be bringing it back again since I got
Okay.
that Angle 4x12 double XL. I actually haven't even done it yet, but I'm curious what that amp sounds like through the 412 XL with a couple of nice Sennheiser microphones through my Neve preamp. I bet that's going to sound amazing. Okay,
It
there's other things
probably will.
involved. There's other things involved here. Okay, whatever. But that's what you do in a studio, right?
Hmm.
You experiment. You pull out different amps, try to find that sound. I guarantee you, we're going to get something hot out of that. No doubt in my mind. I go direct with no preamp, and I can make that amp sound good.
Which model Neve you have?
So it's actually the Warm Audio, the WA, what is it, the 273 EQ. I wish I could show
Okay.
it to you. It's kind of down here. So it's the double rack space, and it has
Uh-huh.
two strips on it. So you've
Uh-huh.
got the preamp and the EQ. And yeah, well, I literally just got it a couple days ago. I sold one of
Hmm.
my controllers and I traded in the other one as part of the purchase here. Pretty much was a wash, so it was a good deal for me. And yeah, you'll see. I'll send you some stuff.
Awesome.
Working on, there's some stuff coming out. Obviously, I'll be doing a video about it. I acquired it on my own. Warm has nothing to do with it, so I can be fully transparent on the experience with this. And I might take a little bit of time with it and maybe do a video about my experience, maybe my first 30 days with this. First time having a real solid, nice analog front end in my studio and the differences that it makes. The first thing I recorded through it
Hmm.
told me that there's some good days ahead of me. Some good
Yeah.
days ahead of me. Yeah.
The old 1073 style preamps give a nice richness to guitar tones, because what it does is, you know how guitar has that spiky upper mid range? It kind of saturates that area and it makes it more pleasant sounding.
Yeah.
That and other areas as well.
See, the thing that I've been contemplating, because as you know, I have a lot of friends in the YouTube community who do amp reviews and things like that, and I'm not going to mention their names, not because for any reason. I respect what they're all doing, but
Mm.
just to keep this kind of neutral. Oh, he's doing it that way. So there's some people will just stick a 57 in the grill and say this is what the amp sounds like. I'm not doing any processing. I'm just going to put it in front of the grill, and I'm going to hack out some chords, and you're going to hear what this amp sounds like. Okay, you put a 57, you stick it in the center, or you put it on the edge of the seam there. You're going to be missing some bottom end that cabinet's putting out. You're not going to hear
Yeah.
it in that example. Are we hearing what that amp sounds like? I'd argue maybe, maybe not. You're hearing that amp through that speaker with the microphone at that position at that particular point in time. We're not processing it. This is what's coming straight off. Okay, fine. Then you can go with IRs. So let's
Mm-hmm.
record it direct and choose the perfect IR. Some of them have mic mixes and blends, so you're going to get a wider range, a nice punchy bottom end. You're going to get a broader spectrum of but no processing. This is
Mm-hmm.
my amp through an IR. Okay, maybe a low cut in the mix because you got to get that unnecessary rumble out of there, and that has no effect on the tone itself. This is what the amp sounds like. So what I've kind of learned in the short time that I've had this, and we'll see how it goes. When I take two microphones and I'm blending two mics, so I'm using like a 421 compact and I'm a little more into the center of the cone to get a little bit more low end information. And then I'm using like an E906 instead of a 57 on sort of the center where the dust cap meets the seam there. That's getting a little more top end information. And then I find the blend between the two. So then I'm getting a wider range of what that speaker is giving me or how that speaker is translating the tone that's coming out of the amplifier. But now that I'm running into this, I have a 3-band EQ on here. So I can either do a cut somewhere if I'm feeling something. I can do my low cut. Plus I have a separate low cut here, which I would do in the DAW anyways. Okay, but I started playing with the EQ and I started bringing things out that I hadn't heard before. And then I did an A/B with the EQ on and the EQ off, and suddenly those tones that I loved before sounded like there was a blanket over my speaker. It's crazy because I was doing it with minimal processing, and suddenly I have this. Now, am I enhancing the amp by doing that, or I'm bringing out the best of the amplifier? Right? We'll see how receptive the audience is when I start doing this more. Like maybe it's an A/B or whatever, but the way I look at it is the amp is a tool, and I'm trying to let people experience the potential that all this gear has. And it's like, taking a picture and not color correcting it before I show people, oh, what a beautiful picture. Well, if it's all flat, if you're shooting C-Log on these modern cameras, like Canon cameras, there's that flat C-Log, but then you throw it into the color corrector and bring out all the colors. Yeah, that's what I see in my head. It's the same thing with an amplifier. Here it is straight off the amp. I haven't done anything to it. This is what the amp sounds like. But no, that's not what the amp sounds like. You want to hear what the amp sounds like, you got to come to my studio. Right? Honestly. So if I can bring out some of that glory that those amazing tones that you're not hearing in translation, perhaps running it through a good preamp and enhancing some of those tones to let you hear what that amp is really doing. There's no right or wrong here, is what I'm trying to say. So I've done a couple of tests and it just sounds so good. Big and full. It's some of the biggest sounding guitars I've ever recorded. And I know guys have been doing this for 50 years. This is nothing new. I'm not trying to say I've charted new territory here, but being someone who's had a home studio for years, I've never had a good front end like this. And in the 2 days that I've had it, I'm like, oh my God, I can never go back. I've seen Gloria Hallelujah. Now, how am I going to go back? I don't know, right? So I better take care of this thing, right?
You know what it reminds me of? It's like we all learn when we're recording to record direct and then make our decisions in the DAW just in case we do something that we don't like or we do something that doesn't tend to work with everything else. We can just undo what we did and change it, right? But when
Yeah,
you make a change and you're recording whatever you recorded, you're stuck with that.
yeah,
But a lot of guys back in the day when they recorded, they didn't have as many options that we have now. So they had to use EQ and compression on the way in and then take that sound and EQ and compress it even more because you're stuck using what's on the board and there's
yeah,
only but so many outboard processors that you can use.
yeah,
So the thing is understanding how to get a good sound, where to roll off, the low and the high end, where to boost and cut on the EQ to really dial in the guitar sound that works for the mix, the kick sound, the snare sound, everything. Once you have all that dialed in and everything is sounding good, then you record that. And you can compress to the point where it's working, you record that, and then whatever you couldn't do because you're limited to what you have, once you have that, you play it back, and then you can make the other little fine-tune adjustments. And that's how great mixes were made back then. So you're basically
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I record direct anyways, and I'll reamp. That's just a good practical workflow for when you have a YouTube channel. So I'm doing a video right now on a series of Schecter guitars that I've been building up to. I've had them here in the studio for a couple months, and now I'm doing the shootout. So I use the guitars in several videos, and I brought back the same songs that I had recorded for whatever videos the guitars appeared in, and I'm able to reamp them into a different amplifier. Like one of them was for a Tonex video, which sounded great actually, but it was about the Tonex cab. This video is not about that. So I wanted to have that Schecter guitar through an angle. I can do that because I have the DIs in the project, and I can reamp. And then I reamped it through the angle, mic to 412 cab, and then I ran it through here. But I made all the adjustments on the way in, so the reamp signal is committed. And as I'm learning it, I did it on a second song, and I found that it was a bit too much top end. It was like once I got into the mix, it sounded good on the way in, and I liked the essence of what I had created, but it needed a little bit of a tweak after the fact. So I used an EQ to bring it down. Now, this comes back to what I said before. Am I delivering a pure representation of what the amp is doing? And I say, well, yes, because if I overcompensated on the high end and I delivered it that way, that was an operator error. That wasn't necessarily what I wanted you to hear. I can go back and reamp it again and bring the top end down a little bit, or I can just scoop it out a little bit with a Pro Q4 or something and just notch it out a little bit. Sounds a little bit better here. It's done. That's what we do in the studio, right? So, anyways, it's this is a topic for a whole podcast in itself.
Yeah.
But I'm excited about the possibilities because ultimately I want to bring out good sounds. I want to share the experience of delivering that. That's where I'm really taking my channel, the experience of creating these sounds. And as a home studio channel, the studio has to factor into that experience. I can't ignore a majority of what this room does. The amps are just the tools that are sitting in the studio. I now have this preamp. I've got lots of plugins and things like that. I can shape those sounds. The old school way, as you were talking about, those guys just went in with confidence. They knew exactly what they wanted, and they knew how to get it, and they committed it to tape, and that's it. Like you said, you couldn't go back, right? That wouldn't be a very efficient workflow for me if I want to recall songs if I want to take that Tonex tone that I created, I want to reuse that riff for a 5150. Well, I'd have to go and play everything all over again to do that, and that's not a good use of my time, especially someone who's working alone. So I love that ability of being able to record DIs and reamp as I need, and I'm building a library of songs, or I call them songettes, little samples and stuff that, sometimes I write fresh songs for a video, and sometimes I just write to write because I'm inspired. But if it's one of those weeks where the well's a little dry and I don't have a lot of time, it's nice to have a library of songs. I'm not selling the song, right? So it's okay. Sometimes I feel like I'm cheapening the video by reusing a song. And if the video got 5, 6, 7,000 views, not a lot of people heard it anyways. So why can't I bring it back, right? And use it for a different purpose. So DI recording and reamping is a godsend when you're doing something like this. But reamping and sort of doing it like that, like you have a guitar player for hire now who's playing the riff, and you can sit here and turn dials and commit and print it. So it gives you kind of a little taste of what it used to be. It's kind of the best of both worlds, and I'm excited about where this is going to go. Old guy with a new toy that has been around for decades, basically, and I'm experiencing it now. If there's any takeaway from our whole discussion today, I think right here, that smile on my face, and I'm talking about a piece of gear that's emulating a classic piece of gear that was used on countless famous records. And it's taken me 55 years to finally experience that. And I'm having so much fun. And I think that's what it's all about. That, just discovering old tools and making it new. It's a lot of fun. I'm excited. I'm excited. Now I want more outboard gear. That'll be part 2.
So what's next on your list for gear besides this Neve preamp that you have?
Since this is technically two channel strips, the only thing it's missing is a compressor. I actually have a Pro VLA2 here that I've had for a while, and I actually had another preamp, an ART. ART is good cheap stuff, but not quite the same. But there's something wrong with this. I actually bid on for review a compressor. I'll keep it kind of because it's not official. I may not get it, but as I'm learning this device, it has an inserts on it, so you can insert the compressor into the preamp so that the compressor will live after the preamp but before the output stage. So it's in the correct position for compressor. So now that I have this, I definitely want to put a compressor in here and have that outboard as well. Once I have that, I mean, I don't know if I need anything more. Obviously, there's a lot of ways I can go, but that might be in terms of personal acquisition. But I'm getting new gear all the time. I just got Origin Effects, some two pedals from Origin Effects, which are killer. I mean, these things they're built like a tank. I don't know what they got in there, but you can just tell just the way they're made. So I can mention it because it's not like they're embargoed or anything. They've been out for a while, but their rep I'm in touch with, so they just sent me those. So we'll be seeing those coming soon. I've got another guitar, which I'm reviewing, which will be done in the next couple of weeks that I just got a couple of weeks ago, which was a thing I did with Sweetwater and another company, which I'm not going to mention because they said it's coming, but until it's here, uh, they have said they'd be interested in sending me a guitar for a demonstration here on the channel. So it's a brand that I've never played before, but I've heard really, really good things. So hopefully, there's always room for another guitar, and definitely we'll be seeing more amps. I certainly don't have John's interview. I call myself Little John. That's my self-imposed nickname. But I got a good collection here, and it's from classic tones to more modern tones here. It's all covered here, and look forward to maybe I got a couple more spaces in this rack. I could put a couple more amps. So
Okay.
sure we'll see
Listen,
something.
you know, I love tube amps myself. I don't have any anymore. I unfortunately got rid of all of mine, along with all of my rack gear, so to say, like outboard EQs, compressors, stuff like that.
Yeah,
I don't have any of that stuff. The only thing I had were preamps.
right.
That's basically the only thing that would be considered outboard gear. Everything
Yeah,
else is just in the box
yeah,
because you really don't need them today. They take up so much space,
yeah.
you know. And I love amps. I wish I'm to the point now where it's like I'm watching you with all these amps and I want some. Now I want to buy tube amps, because I miss the feel. Like there's something about playing through a real amp that you just cannot get from a modeler, and if you've never played a tube amp, then you just don't understand.
Well, when you hit a milestone with your business, maybe treat yourself to one. Just have that trophy acquisition that you can look at it. You don't have to play it. Just stare at it. Just it's their works. Some of them are works of art. Looking at those tubes in there,
Hmm.
from an era gone by.
Yeah.
There's there's still some nostalgia. Even if you didn't live in that area, you still get a
Hmm.
feeling of nostalgia just looking at the tubes inside. And
Hmm.
it's almost future. It's funny. It's almost futuristic, but it's obviously
Yes.
not. It's weird because you don't see that in modern devices, and you
Hmm.
know phones that are so powerful with the computing power and the things that they can do.
Hmm.
They all kind of look the same, right? But
Yeah.
this angle or this Evo, I should mention the Evo amp here, which is a hand wired amp. I looked inside. I mean, the transformers in there are just look good. They're beautiful. The components they put in there, high end components. And then we're talking about the tube workshop here. They're just works of art, even on a budget. I'm not promoting anyone here specific, but Long's, that's an import brand,
Hmm.
and some people think of Chinese built hardware as cheap, but this company was actually built as a boutique local business to support the local community. It wasn't originally meant to mass produce and ship them to North America. That was the thing. I guess it caught on. Some people discovered them. They are less expensive, but they're high quality. They're using American and European parts, and they're manufactured and assembled in their Chinese in northern China. But they're great quality amplifiers. Got the small 800 clone-ish kind of thing and the SLO 30 style with this HD 30 here with the more SLO flavors. Good amplifiers. You don't have to spend $3,000, $4,000 on an amp. I mean, something like this is like $600 or something like that. Not a lot. That one's under $1,000, and that's a beast of an amp.
Well,
So,
it's funny how people today still associate China with being bad quality when just
well, there
about
is a lot of bad
everything.
quality too. That's why.
I mean, there is. I think if you're buying like off of what's that, like Temu or something like that,
Temu,
but
how do you pronounce it?
Temu, however it's found, but literally everything that's out there, it's made in China. Your Apple devices, my Samsung devices, our clothes, our electronics, everything is manufactured in China. Everything. It doesn't matter where the brand is from, it's manufactured in China. So the stuff that we use every day that we enjoy the quality of shows you that they make good stuff in China.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, this is obviously a wider discussion that we probably should start 8 minutes before the end of your podcast, but but it's look, I understand. I mean, we want to support our local communities where possible.
Right.
We are in an international trade, which is being challenged right now, which we won't get into on this podcast. But for someone who trying to be agnostic to all of this right now, there are certain sensitivities that I do have, and I keep that inside. But when I use a piece of gear and I said this was made in China, I find I have to say this is not a mass-produced product. Like you said, iPhone is a good example, American company, but they're using Chinese ability to build these things, right? I mean, this iPhone, if it was made in the United States, you'd have to pay like $4,000 for it, right? So these Wong's amplifiers, they're not fast food amps. I got red and white boxes. People thought it was a Chinese food or something, but that's just the color choice. But they're good quality amplifiers, right? So, but that's my job though. With anything that I have here, I choose to put products on the channel that I enjoy. I don't just shill anything. I'm not getting paid for every video that I do. I'm starting to get some sponsored videos and things. I got to eat. I got kids, right? So, but I try and make it an experience and give you a day in the life of, hey, I'm using this amp and this is the sounds I'm getting today. And that's what it's for, right? Just like you said, some people are asking about your computers because of Tonex. That was a pain point that I had. So I wanted to tell that story, and I'm glad that you thought it was a good idea, and then ultimately the video sort of conveyed that hey, this is possible. This is a problem that I had, and here's the solution. Worked for me. I always encourage people to try it for themselves too. So, but yeah, the whole international thing again, that's a bigger topic for another day. But my job is if it's good and I'm enjoying it, then I'll tell that story, no matter where it's
Absolutely.
no matter where it's from, with small exceptions.
Oh, listen, Dan, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to come on here and have this conversation. I've enjoyed the conversation. We've touched on a lot of different things during this almost 2 hours now that we've been having this conversation. It
I'd
doesn't
like
even
to know if
seem like
anyone
it's
is
been
still
that
watching
long.
this. Is anyone still watching this right
Yeah,
now? Just tell us who you are, okay?
right,
We'd love to know
right.
who you are. We'll give you a shout out or something because I don't know. Maybe it's just maybe my mother's the only one still. Even my mother's not going to watch it this far. But thank you. Listen, I appreciate you, man. Like we haven't known each other for very long, but I think we connected on the first day, and people need to understand that people are busy and they're doing their thing. Not everybody is friends with everybody, and there's certain companies that I deal with that I am often disappointed by the way I'm treated or just the lack of interest. But when you connect with someone,
Mhm.
we take time out of our busy days to communicate and stuff like that. And you and I have been in regular touch since then, and because I really respect what you're doing, and I know that pushing it up a hill it's hard, and you take your lumps and stuff too, as we all do. But that's part of the game.
Mhm.
But I wouldn't spend my time featuring your products and talking about it if it didn't help me for real, because I don't have that kind of time to waste. So it's important for anyone who has made it this far to know that. And I respect what you're doing, man, and I appreciate having you around. It's made the quality of life be even better having you in my circle. So I appreciate you.
Thank you, thank you. I feel the same way. I am genuinely grateful to have gotten to know you and talk with you on and off camera. You and I have talked a lot, and I'm looking forward to hanging out with you in person later this year. We're gonna make that happen.
We got to do it. We're not that far away from each other, right? So
No, we're not at all. We're not at all. And
I'll meet you in Rochester or something.
we could we can make it happen. I'll come up to Canada. You know,
Yeah.
I haven't been to Well, I went last year, but I can go again this year. No problem. No
Hey man,
problem.
come hang out, or in the summer months, meet you in Niagara Falls, whatever you want, man. Let's
Yeah,
make it.
yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I might be making it to Gear Street, so we might be hanging out there if you're gonna go.
Hey man, I'm there. I'm supposed to be there this
You
year,
know,
so health willing, I will be there.
we'll talk about all of that later. But again, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Everyone, if you're not already, please follow and subscribe to this man's incredible channel. You'll learn so much and you won't be sorry. Thank you
You bet.
again.
All the
All
best,
right.
my friend.
You too. Take care.
Cheers. Cheers.